What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy K-Dog. This one we got a just a quick deck tech for the Friday night Magic event, which is Historic Brawl. So obviously we're going to be losing Historic when the new set comes out, but this is kind of a way to say farewell to Historic until the next anthology releases in a month or so, whenever that is. And so this is the list that I will be running. I got a couple other versions that I will kind of talk about a little bit as well. But my commander that I'm going to be looking at here is Vaevictis Asmadi the Dire. So Vaevictis is a 6-mana 6/6. That's 3 black, red, and green. It's a legendary Elder Dragon with flying. And basically what it says is when Vaevictis attacks, each player reveals a top card of their library, and if it is a permanent card, you put that card onto the battlefield. So you don't cast it or anything like that. You just, boom, put it down on the battlefield. And so for me, those I'll be running, which is 100% permanence. Everything in here is a permanent. So all of our removal, running creatures, running planeswalkers, a couple enchantments and artifacts, and everything else is lands, so 100% permanence. We're always going to cheat something out onto the battlefield with this attack trigger. And then our opponent, obviously they're going to be running some permanents as well, so sometimes we'll be kind of doing them a favor. However, to get something onto the battlefield, we choose permanents. So first we choose a permanent to sacrifice, and then we choose for our opponent what permanent they will sacrifice. And then once those permanents are sacrificed, then the top card is revealed, and then permanents are then put onto the battlefield. If that top card is a permanent, it's put onto the battlefield. So it's really fun commander because kind of crazy stuff happens. Your opponent could just get something like really, really good, and maybe like a Sephara or something like that, and then next thing you know, your Vaevictis is dead because they got a Sephara off your attack trigger. So crazy stuff can just kind of happen out of nowhere, but that's kind of what makes it fun, and that's kind of the whole point, I think, of Brawl, is just kind of the crazy stuff that can happen sometimes. So just kind of go over my list real quick and then kind of offer some alternatives as well. So we're going to start with Gilded Goose. It's our only 1-drop. It's 0/2 flyer, of course creates a food token, and then you can sack the food token for 1 mana of any color. So 3-color deck. Everything in here is just one-ofs except for basic lands, so we kind of need all the fixing we can get. Especially as you get higher up in the curve, we have a lot of double and triple mana costs and things like that, and Gilded Goose is just one way for us to kind of fix our mana or even ramp as well. It's also running a copy of Dusk Legion Zealot. It's a 1/1 for 2. Lets us draw a card at the expense of 1 life when it enters the battlefield. So anything we do in the early game to kind of keep drawing cards and kind of digging through our deck for more resources. Seekers Squire, kind of a similar thing. It's a 1/2 for 2. When it enters, it explores. Of course, explores is you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you draw it into your hand. Anything else, you can choose to leave on top of your library or put it in your graveyard. So obviously that's really fantastic with Vaevictis out, because if you then get to see what your next card is, so you say you have Vaevictis out, and then you can drop one of your Explorer creatures pre-combat, and then you can see what card is going to be on top of your library, and if that's something you want with Vaevictis, then you can just leave it there, and if not, you can just put it in your graveyard and dig for something else. So that's a really nice little bit of synergy there. And Elvish Visionary, the same thing as a Zealot, only it's in green, and we don't have to lose a life. Incubation Druid is just going to be some nice fixing for us. It's 0/2 for 2, but taps for mana, depending on what kind of lands we can already tap for mana. And if it sticks around long enough, we could potentially sink some mana into it just to adapt it and make it a 3/5. So that's not bad. And Kenrith's Transformation is a kind of our permanent removal spell. In terms of just being an enchantment, as when it enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card, and then we enchant a creature. That creature loses all abilities and is a green elk, 3/3. So it's kind of removal, basically. We could kind of use it on maybe like a Elvish Visionary or something like that to make it a 3/3 instead of a 1/1. But mostly it's just in there to target our opponent's creatures and either take away some activated abilities or triggered abilities on their creature, or just take one of their big creatures and just turn it into a generic 3/3. It doesn't do anything. And Merfolk Branchwalker, of course, 2-1 that explores, super good card. Paradise Druid, obviously, 2-1, taps for mana of any color, 3-color deck, obviously it goes in. Cindervines is an enchantment that's also enchantment and artifact removal, so that's perfect. And also punishes our opponent for playing non-creature spells. It's Brawl, so they're going to be. I mean, Vaevictis is pretty much the only commander that wants 100% permanence, so everybody else is going to have some amount of non-creature spells. Arcane Signet is a little bit of a ramp and color fixing. As it's a 2-mana artifact, we can add 1 mana of any color. Inevitable End is another form of enchantment removal for 3 mana. We can enchant a creature, and at the beginning of that player's upkeep, they have to sacrifice a creature. So it's great to put on like our opponents, like commander or something like that. Obviously, they probably don't want to sacrifice their commander, so they will have to be forced to sacrifice something else, etc., etc. So hopefully, this will take out 2 or 3 things at least before they're forced to sacrifice whatever we targeted with this. Midnight Reaper, just a fantastic source of card draw and a 3/2 creature in and of itself. And of course, Murderous Rider, as it's a creature that also acts as removal. Since we're all permanents, we need anything, any permanents that can also be used for removal, and Murderous Rider fills that bill perfectly. Elvish Rejuvenator, it's a 1/1 for 3. We get to look at the top 5 cards of our library when it enters and put any land we choose onto the battlefield tapped. So the nice thing about this, doesn't have to be a basic, since we are running so many dual lands. So any land we want for fixing or whatever, doesn't matter. Just put that down, enters tapped, and that's also great fodder for Vaevictis. If we need stuff to sacrifice, it's more lands to sacrifice to Vaevictis, or just a 1/1 body that's already done its job, and now we can sacrifice that to Vaevictis and then get something better from the top of our library. And of course, Jade Light Ranger, that's a 2/1 that explores twice, just super powerful card. Reclamation Sage, it's a creature that acts as enchantment or artifact removal. Guaranteed your opponent's going to be running some kind of artifacts or enchantments. Leyline Prowler is a 2/3 Death Touch lifelink and adds 1 mana of any color. I mean, this pretty much checks off all the box. It's removal, it's life gain, and it's a fixing, and it's a creature. So yeah, fits in perfectly with what we're trying to do here. Rhythm of the Wild, this is the real all-star here. The thing about playing Vaevictis is you absolutely want to cast it with haste, and so you need some ways to enable haste. Rhythm of the Wild is fantastic in that regard, because also your creatures can't be countered. So if you are running somebody against somebody who's a little bit of a counter magic, then they can't counter your creatures anymore, and then your creatures got to come in with haste, and you can kind of catch them off guard sometimes with that. Also running Mana Geode for some additional ramp and fixing here. When it enters, we get to scry 1, and of course scrying, exploring, anything like that. We get the peek at the top card of our library with the Vaevictis out is super great synergy. And then just being able to add 1 mana of any color in our 3-color deck. Of course, Ravenous Chupacabra is like the first card I put in. It's a 2/2. When it enters, destroy a creature an opponent controls. So this is pretty amazing if it's on the top of your library and you go to attack with a Vaevictis, and then you pull this off, and then you can destroy an additional creature or permanent on their side. Iroas' Blessing is an enchantment that also kind of acts as removal. So when it enters, that creature gets +1/+1, and then we deal 4 damage to a creature or a planeswalker and opponent controls. So it's actually really great being able to hit planeswalkers as well. So obviously in Brawl, your opponent's going to be running some planeswalkers. The planeswalker might even be their commander. And so Blessing maybe not finishes it, but at least deals 4 damage to it. So that's pretty sweet. And sticking with permanent themes, the Ukron War is a saga that lets us basically act as a one-sided board wipe, as when it comes down we get to gain control of one of our opponent's creatures. The next turn all of their creatures must attack, and then the third saga is all tapped creatures on our opponent's side deal damage equal to their power to themselves. So obviously there are some creatures that have power toughness differential, but for the most part Ukron War is going to be kind of a little mini board wipe. And Nylea, since we are kind of leaning green in our 3-color deck, having the Devotion to 5 shouldn't be that hard to pull off. And so 5/6 Indestructible reduces the cost of our creature spells, and also lets us look at the top card of our library, so that's pretty sweet. And Pelucanos, of course, 4 mana, 6/6. It's also a creature that acts as kind of removal, as it can fight our opponent's creatures. And we're sacking stuff for Vaevictis. We have to sacrifice our own stuff. So we're going to be filling up our graveyard, and then that gives us more fuel to escape Pelucanos. So just absolutely perfect fit for what we're trying to do here. And Vraska is a planeswalker that kind of acts as removal and card advantage. So of course she goes in, and if she sticks around long enough, that -9 can just be game ending. Domri is another way to haste in our creatures, and it's a great source of card advantage since we are so creature heavy. So we can +1 to add red or green, and if we cast a creature spell that way, that creature gains Riot. So Riot, of course, you can choose haste or a +1 counter on it. And of course we're mostly going to be choosing haste. Or we can just -3 to dig for more creatures, look at the top 4, and reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them. So that's pretty sweet. And of course, if you do get to the -8, then just making 4/4s every turn, that's pretty much going to close out the game. And Samut is our last way to enable haste, as it's a 4-mana planeswalker at 5 loyalty. Her static ability just says creatures you control have haste. And however, the -1, even if they have removal for some reason, you can -1, target creature gets +2/+1 and gains haste until end of turn. So you can guarantee that creature has haste. And it's the Scry 1 though is what we're mostly looking at, as we can kind of anything to obviously look at the top card of our library and kind of fix that for Vaevictis' attack trigger. And of course, Cavalier of Night is a creature that acts as removal, 4/5 lifelink, and if it dies, we get one of our creatures back. It's a 1, 2, or 3 drop, of course. Lulu's Contract is an enchantment that's card draw, so that's pretty sweet. When it enters, we draw 4 cards and lose 4 life. So a little bit of a downside, but obviously you saw with the Cavalier and things like that, we have a little bit of lifelink. So occasionally this could be bad, but usually just drawing 4 cards, even if you lose 4 life, it's not going to be a problem. Sometimes you just kind of dump out your hand, you're digging for answers in the late game, and Lulu's Contract, even if you hit this with Vaevictis, it's pretty sweet. And Demanding Dragon, just really big fan of this card. 5/5 flyer for 5. When it enters, your opponent has to sacrifice a creature or take 5 damage. So that's pretty sweet. Especially if you can haste this in and your opponent has already cleared the board or something like that, then they just take 5 damage because the board is empty, and then you haste it in and hit them for 5 more. It's just super sweet card. And Vivian also kind of acts as a removal and card advantage. Just a fantastic 5-mana planeswalker. We can -3 to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Obviously Vaevictis has flying, so Vivian can kind of clear the way for Vaevictis to get in for damage. And then you can just dig for creatures or lands with her +1. And of course her -8 is pretty ridiculous, giving all your creatures +2/+2, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. Vraska Relic Seeker, the other Vraska, 6 mana. A little bit expensive, but for +2 we get a 2/2 pirate with Menace. And -3 we can destroy an artifact, creature, or enchantment and create a treasure token. So of course treasure token can be sacrificed for mana of any color, so it's a little bit of fixing or ramp if we need to play additional spells. Vraska, that's a nice little bonus that Vraska enables. And then of course -10, target player's life total becomes 1. That's not literally game ending, but might as well be. So just super powerful planeswalker and really great in the Brawl environment. We're also running Ravager Wurm, 3 red, double green, a 4/5 with Riot. And when it enters, we can fight creature we don't control, or destroy a land with an activated ability that's a mana ability. So obviously, Brawl, people are going to be running a lot of non-basic lands with activated abilities. So there's so much flexibility on this card. It's just beautiful for Brawl. It's removal in the form of a creature, and we need all the removal we can get, since we aren't running any actual spells, and Ravager Wurm fits that bill nicely. And then the Riot is just a nice little bonus, so we can haste it in or just make it a little bit bigger. And of course, if we have Rhythm of the Wild, it just gets double Riot, so we make it bigger and haste it in as well. So just a fantastic card. And Wurm, it's an old favorite of mine with Vaevictis, 7/7 Trample. When it enters, you gain 7 life, and when it dies, draw a card. There's just no downside here. Obviously, if you hit this with a Vaevictis, that's pretty sweet. You just gain 7 life out of nowhere. And then you got a 7/7 Trample down on the board as well that your opponent has to deal with. So obviously, you do want to hit some bombs here with Vaevictis, so you can get some pretty sweet stuff with it. But you also need stuff to kind of ramp and do stuff in the early games as well, so you're not just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for Vaevictis, and your opponent just holds up removal the whole time, and that kind of thing. So you do need to kind of mix it up, and so that's why I kind of have a pretty balanced list. You can see my curve. I have lots of 2 and 3 and 4 drops as well. But then here at the top end, we do have some pretty serious bombs that can kind of help us close out the game. most of which are there, guys. 7 mana, 7 powered legendary dragon with flying, trample, and haste. Yeah, that's pretty. It's a pretty powerful bomb there. And if it dies, you instead exile with 3 egg counters on it, and basically you just each of your upkeeps you remove an egg counter. No more counters on it. Comes back onto the battlefield. Flying, trample, haste, baby. And so going over the mana base real quick. So we are leaning slightly towards green. We do want some, obviously some graveyard interaction. So Bojuka Bog is a way to do that. As a land, so we don't have to dedicate like a Leyline of Void or anything like that, or artifacts, anything like that. We do want some basic swamp, basic mountain, 3 forests, since we have so many early green creatures, so we want to make sure we can cast those as consistently as possible. And then of course Blood Crypts, Bloodfell Cave, Cinderbarons, the Dragon Skull Summit, Temple of Malice, Foul Orchard, Jungle Hollow, Overgrown Tomb, Temple of Malady, Woodland Cemetery, Rootbound Crag, Rugged Highlands, Stomping Ground, Temple of Abandon, Timber Gorge. Of course you got to run Command Tower if you're running a multicolored Brawl deck. Detection Tower, since we do have so much targeted removal and spells. Obviously with Vaevictis we can target anything, but of course your opponent has hexproof. We do need to make sure we have a way around that. And the nice thing about Vaevictis is that it's once you target something, your opponent has to sacrifice it, so that gets around like indestructible and that kind of thing. So that's pretty sweet. All we have to do is just make sure we can target it, and so Detection Tower is a nice way to get around hexproof and make sure we can get rid of anything that we want. And then Field of the Dead, I mean, we're just running a million different lands anyway, so it makes perfect sense. And then so those lands give us 2/2 zombies, which are perfect fodder for Vaevictis. That way we don't have to sacrifice anything else. We can just keep all of our mana in play, and any of our creatures around to chump block or whatever the case may be, and we just keep sacking these 2/2 zombies that we get off of lands for free. So yeah, Field of the Dead's a pretty fun card. So this is the version I will be running. Obviously there are some changes you can make to it based on your own collection and personal preferences. Obviously some other cards I thought about were like Tybalt and things like that. But I do have another couple versions that I will post links to in the description. There is a one that still with Vaevictis as the commander we're talking about. And so the other version is leans towards red, and it's more dragon based. So things like Terror of Mount Velis and Lathlis and the Planeswalker Sarkhan, both Sarkhans. And so there are some spells in there, like Storm's Wrath, because it's very top heavy, so we do need to make sure that we have as much early interaction as possible to stay alive so we can get to our big payoffs at the end. So it's a lot beefier, it's a lot slower, but some pretty powerful explosive plays, and so it's definitely had some fun kind of doing a little bit of play tests. It's unfortunate that you can't really test or play Brawl on Historic without a direct challenge, because it's such a fun format to play. However, if you guys have not heard of arenabrawl.net, definitely check it out. It's a way to play either standard or historic Brawl at any time. Just make sure you have your deck ready, your player ID ready to go, and they will match you up with somebody. So yeah, it's a pretty sweet website. And so that was the other version, and then the third version is kind of more of a green stompy-ish version with things like Goreclaw and just a lot of the green creatures. So it's a little bit more condensed in the kind of the 3, 4, and 5 mana slots. So it's kind of almost trying to go wide a little bit and just kind of some pretty beefy plays with Galta and that sort of thing. So I will post those lists in the description down below. But since this is the main deck that I will be running, it's my preferred version because it's nice and balanced. It's not too top heavy, but it's not too focused on just like ramping into something. So yeah, this is the Vaevictis. It's a super fun Brawl or EDH even commander, and yeah, definitely had a lot of fun playing it this week and testing, and definitely gonna be looking forward to playing quite a bit on the FNM event as well. So all right, guys, let me know any changes you would make, and let me know what decks you are running, and of course, if anybody wants to challenge me, send me a message or leave a comment, and I'd be happy to match up with you sometime, either standard or historic or brawl, whatever you're interested in. Just let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next one. Take care.